Okay, so everybody, I'm back out of the ravine where I got the clay from that you guys just saw. Figured I'd spare you the walk back up here and my huffing and puffing. But so now I'm going to take, before again, I spend a lot of time processing this clay into something that I would use for pottery. Just to see if I even like the colors of it and how it looks and how well it holds up. I figured, well, the easiest thing would be, again, to make a few of the actual terracotta tiles out of it that would give me an idea of how well it fires, what it looks like when it has been fired, and if I want to continue to work with it. So first things first, I've got to go get a little bit of water over there at the garden hose so that I can make this workable and make it into tiles. So I'm gonna go get some water. I'll be right back. And like I said before, the last time I did this, the tiles were a little bit on the dry side, and they tended to crack, which led me to have to put like almost like a slip, a clay slip, a real watery clay mixture across the cracks to try to hold it all together. So I don't want to make that mistake again. I'd like my tiles to look a little smoother. So again, my thought is to make this maybe a little bit on the wetter side. Might make it more challenging to get off the board. We'll have to try to play around with, again, making sure we use enough dry powdered clay, which is what I think I'm going to use instead of the wood ash. Because the wood ash, again, at the temperature that I'm firing these terracotta tiles to, did not dissolve the wood ash or did not melt it. So I really didn't like that look of the wood ash on the tiles after they had been kiln fired. So I figure if I used powdered clay, that would also allow me to get it off the board pretty easily. But at the same time, I think it will dissolve, or it will not affect the final look of the terracotta tile so much. So, so yeah, let me get some water and I'll be right back. Okay, so one lesson learned. When it comes to adding water to your clay, be patient and really work your clay a lot with your hands first and work your water in slowly. What I didn't realize is there was quite a bit of water content obviously already in the clay, and I had way too much water, so I actually had to go get more of the drier clay down from the riverbed, and I worked it a lot with my hands. And then I added some of the softer clay that I had up here already that was too soft into it, to where, you know, it's a solid mass. Hopefully it will shape well and it won't crack. Again, that's kind of what I'm trying to avoid by going wetter. But if you go too wet and it gets real sticky, now it's going to stick to everything, and it won't even hold, the tiles won't hold together well enough for you to get them off the board. So it is a fine line of what you're trying to accomplish. So I'm going to do make a couple of tiles for you, just so that you can see the process that I'm using as to how I go about doing it. This is basically when I was doing the renovation of my dwelling. This is just some of the old tile that was down that I replaced. And so what I've actually been finding is that this slick side, it's coated with like a non-slick, like a waterproofing, because it's meant to go on like a basement concrete floor, is pretty slippery. So if I cover this with like some sand and grit and then make my tiles on this, getting them off seems to be pretty easily. So this is the board that I actually kind of knead or roll the clay out onto. And then this board right here, all I'm really using it for is a straight edge. So I'm either using it to trim along the edge. I'm also using, this is the width of my tiles. Hold on a second, let me get a tape measure. So I was thinking about, well, what size tiles should I make? I mean, with clay, right? The sky's the limit. Well, actually, your kiln space is the limit. And being that I have a very small little electric kiln right now that I'm making these terracotta tiles with, that's really my limit. So what I figured was the kiln itself is 6.5 inches tall, and I kind of want them to stand up in there. so that I can get as many in as I want. So I figured, okay, 6 inches, 6.5 is the height, but let me make them 6 inches so they don't scrape the roof. So I'm like, well, that's my length. Now what's my width gonna be? So I grabbed the board, and I wasn't really that concerned. I didn't want them to be square. I want them to be rectangular, but I wasn't really thinking of, oh, I need a certain width board. This board is 3.5 inches. So they're 3.5 inches wide by 6 inches long. And actually I said for I'm trying to keep things simple. I don't want to overcomplicate things. I'm trying to use things that I have. I don't want to go out and buy a bunch of stuff because again, part of what I want to be able to do is to make pottery, fire my pottery on a budget, because again, ceramic equipment, if any of you have ever researched that, it's expensive. I mean, a good sized kiln, I don't know your dimensions, but like maybe 18 inches or 2 feet wide by 2.5, 3 feet tall, you can be anywhere between $2.5 grand to $6 grand for kilns. And again, I'm trying to have a hobby and maybe to make a little money at doing something that I enjoy doing. So I don't want to be pouring tons of money into this, because again, it's just a hobby. So there you go. So my thing is I want to use what I have lying around. If I have scrap wood and I can use it for a board to put something on, to cut something to shape, that's really what I'm trying to do, is to, again, live within your means. So anyway, that's what I use for the width. I measure 6 inches with my ruler and put a mark, and then I cut it off. That's the depth. And hold on, gotta get my knife and my spray paint can so that you can see what I lay them over to get the curve. So this is my knife that I'm going to use to cut it off. Actually, the idea for the design came from another potter in California. His name is Husin Lin. Makes his own tools. I don't even know. I can't even see. Yeah. So if you can see, this is just a hacksaw blade. And then he basically would take it and he would file it down, and then he would cut it real sharp. And so it's like a needle tool for trimming. But so it being very thin, it doesn't catch in the clay, and it cuts through clay very nicely. But again, he talks about, well, he sells tools like this, makes them, but also, he shows you them up close so that you can make your own if you want to. So I decided to make my own. Again, my brother-in-law had a hacksaw blade laying around, and I said, it was one that he was throwing away. I said, "Do you want that?" He said, "No." I said, "Okay, well, good. I got something to make my tools out of." So I made 2 tools out of this hacksaw blade. I made a chattering tool like Mr. Lin's, and then I made a needle tool for cutting my clay. But very nice. So anyway, all right. Well, let's get to trying to make some tiles. So here is the clay. I'm not skilled or experienced at clay making by any stretch of the imagination, but most guys who work with clay, they wedge their clay. I don't even know how to wedge my clay really well. I mean, they sit there and they work it around, and they get it to where this thing makes this perfect spirally shape and all the air's out of it. I'm not there yet. I'll have to practice some of these things, but I squish it around to try to mix it up uniform. Again, being that these are rolled out so thin too, I believe that by me patting them out and rolling them out, I'm squeezing pretty much any of the air that may be trapped in it out. So here's the thing. Give me one more second. I'm gonna grab a hammer. First, I thought about using some clay that I had already processed, but again, I'm actually against that. The more I think about it, it doesn't make any sense to use refined processed clay like this that I've actually spent a lot of time sifting and all that. That represents a lot of work to do that. Doesn't make sense to use good clay like that to make a tile. That doesn't really matter what the texture is so much. So this is some clay pieces right here that was from the last tiles that I made. So they come out terracotta, but when you start them out, it's very tan color, as you can see. So again, I'll be interested to see what color this clay turns into. And as you can see, the difference in the color, this is a much grayer, even though this is wet, so obviously it's going to dry lighter. But this is a much deeper gray color, and this was a much lighter tan color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to crush up this tan clay. It's dry, bone dry, and use it as my powder on my baseboard, so that as I make my terracotta tiles, they won't stick hopefully to the board. And again, hopefully this clay will not look so bad on the terracotta tiles as the wood ash did. I was, I was more hopeful that the wood ash would look better than what it really did. So let's just grind that up real good. I'll probably have to go find some more dry clay somewhere. But so got my board. You want to take this and you want to lay it out. Okay. And as you can see, I'm not a professional, so it's not like I've got everything always ready to go the way it should be. So I'm not in production mode, but I want to show you how I made this. So really, I just flatten this thing out into a decently, some sort of an oblong shape, because again, the tile itself is going to be oblong. But then I throw her down like so. And actually, I honestly just, like I said, using what I have, I'm just going to take this can and kind of thin it out to a good thickness. I noticed that with a lot of my first tiles, ooh, see, it'll stick. I noticed with a lot of my first tiles that I made them too thick. So this is much thinner, which again, honestly, in the long run, I don't think it's really gonna matter. It's a rustic looking roof in the first place. But so then I basically take my board, because I know that it's even, parallel lined. I'm gonna take my trimming tool and I'm gonna just trim off the edges. So whoop. Hopefully you're seeing this. Again, I'm not good at this yet, knowing what I'm in the shop, plus being in the sun, I can't really see my screen that well. Learning process. So there's the sides. Yeah, this is soft, so that's, I went softer because I think maybe it'll stop it from splitting. But so there's your, now she's cut evenly. Now I've got to make the top and bottom of the tile. So again, just using this as a straight edge, kind of laying it across there. And again, some of my first tiles were quite crude, because again, I was just trying to see whether it would work. I was learning at the same time. So hopefully my tiles will continue to look better and better. All right, so, and again, this is all approximation. Nothing's got to be perfect. So we're gonna go 6 inches, make a mark. Okay, so that's gonna be how long my tile is gonna be. Again, I'm eyeballing everything. I mean, I'm not getting squares and levels and all this great stuff off. So there we go. The corner came off a little bit. Again, this is pretty soft clay. I'm not even too sure how well it's going to stay together, how well it's going to form or dry or support itself. I've not used this clay before. So anyway, so now you can see I've got my outline cut out. And again, I go about a ½ inch down, but again, it's not really super critical. And now this is going to be a hole in the tile. And you're saying, well, why are you putting a hole in the tile? Because with any tile, you've got to find a way to affix it to the roof. And part of the reason for me choosing terracotta tiles to roof the kiln with, I'm not going to use wood, I'm not going to use shingle or anything like that. One, it's not going to weather that well, the wood wouldn't. But again, you got to realize that there's going to be a lot of heat coming out of this kiln, so whatever is on there has to be able to withstand a good amount of heat. I said, well, something that's already been fired should withstand a decent amount of heat. So anyway, but you got to figure out, well, how am I going to attach this? So once this is dried, and it is ready to go on, that is where you will nail the tile into the cob roof. And so then that'll just hold it in place, and then hopefully it won't move. So now she's formed. I think that's a big enough hole. I don't know how well you can see it, but I think that's a big enough hole for a nail to go through. I haven't really decided, again, what nails I'll use. But anyway, so now the trick is to get it to have the curve that a terracotta tile, barrel style terracotta tile should have. So I got to get this off the board, and again, hopefully she'll release with the clay that I put underneath it, and it did. Nice. It released pretty well. Now, once again, I do see quite a bit of cracking going on, so I'm not really sure what I can do about that. I didn't really, yeah, it's cracking quite a bit actually. I don't know if I will have to go wetter still. Or maybe I'll just have to, again, put that creamy clay slip over all my cracks to seal it up, and I'll just have to deal with the fact that they're rough instead of smooth. Maybe more water will help. Maybe I'll try that on the next tile. Actually, you know, I've got some really wet, again, clay, because I overmixed too much clay, or at least I thought I overmixed it. But let me wet this down. I'm gonna go get that other wet clay, and we'll try to make another one and see if it indeed does crack less than this one. I said this might be fine, but again, I don't, you know, you're trying to keep water out, so I imagine cracking is bad. So I'm gonna get some wet clay, if nothing else, to rub over the top of this one, or maybe some water. I'll try to get some water and wipe it and see if I can get a smoother finish. So I'll be right back. Okay, so clay is such a wonderful thing to work with. It's a very forgiving medium. There are all sorts of ways to fix boo-boos and errors. So I went over to the sprinkler, and I got some water on my fingers, and rather than take other clay that was gritty on there, I just took the water from there and just kept rubbing it until it smoothed into a very nice surface. So there are no cracks in sight now. I don't know if they will reappear as it dries. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. We'll find out. But it's actually a much smoother and more finished look to the tile than the cracks. And also, if it stays this consistency, I think I'll like it better than the actual. I think I'll like it better than the actual kind of clay slip that I rubbed all over it before. So anyway, I need to find a good spot for this to dry, because again, in a situation like this, the sun is your friend. So let's see if I'd like to show you. I can't even see if I'm in the picture, or what's in the picture and what's not in the picture here. Hold on. Stay. Oh boy, I've kind of fudged up my tile already. If I could stand that up like that, it'd probably stick. All right. Let's see here. So, again, I want a nice, I want a nice area for this to dry in the sun. I've already almost lost the sun for the day, but so now the place to be is off this can so the air can get to it. And the nice thing is once it's kind of held its shape, it should hopefully come off in one piece. Oh, no, she's cracking. She's not strong like the other ones were. So that's interesting. So not only does it crack a lot more, it's a lot softer. So, I mean, once she's in position, she's holding her shape. But at the same time, I dare not touch all of this now, because it will only make the matters worse. So what I'm going to do, I think, is I'm going to let her harden up a little bit in this shape, and then I may, once she's in that shape, I may go ahead and rub some water across there again. So definitely using the other clay, they definitely held their shape a lot better. And it might have to do with the fact, again, that there's a lot more sand in that other clay. This is more pure clay, which again you would think would be more plastic, but that had some more rigidity to it. This seems to be very kind of weak. So again, I don't know if this tile will work out well at all. I definitely would say that maybe I would want to go with a stiffer clay, but again, the stiffer it is, the more I believe it'll probably crack. So yeah, it's an interesting problem. Like, it needs to be stiff enough to work with, but not dry enough that it's gonna crack. So that's how we go about making. That's the process that I have been using to make my tiles. And let's see here. See if we can get back in the shot again. So yeah, that's what I've been using to make my tiles. Yeah, just, I don't know. Let's yeah, it's interesting. I'm really surprised that for as much clay content as this seems to have to it, at first glance, it's not really. It is plastic. I mean, it is pliable. You can get clay out of this if you process it, I'm sure. But in its raw state, it actually appears that the tan clay that I got over there, maybe with the more rock and grit in it and sand, actually throws a little better. Let me see if I can get a little bit more dry clay to put on this board, maybe for one more attempt. Work our clay into something that's workable. So we have a ball of clay. Let's see here. Try to take some of this other clay that I got, and we'll try to maybe put down a heavier layer of it, so that way this clay tile does not stick the way the last one did. Hopefully that's enough. So okay, you want a nice bed. You want a nice bed. Mr. Ant wanted to go along for the ride. Sorry, sir, I'm working. But anyway, you want a nice bed of soft clay or grit so that the tile does not stick to it. And then again, now your tile, you want to just kind of maybe make it into a little bit of an oblong shape. I mean, this clay almost feels, I mean, I'm not that knowledgeable on clay, but it's so soft and plastic. I wonder how well it would throw if I was to try to throw it. But anyway, so let's try to roll this out. Okay, and I can see a lot of cracking already in it, so I assume that this is going to crack quite a bit as I tried to transfer it. But let's go ahead and cut our width. Not our width, but our width. And kind of get a nice spot. Again, the top side too, where you put the nail through. It doesn't necessarily have to be that square, because it's going to be hidden by the shingle that will be on top of it. So and again, if your tiles are a little wonky, I don't think it's going to matter that much. Now, okay. You know, if you want to fix up your corners a little bit, you didn't like how square or not square it was, you can go ahead and do that. And then we'll take the fines off here. Take the tool and try to waller out a little hole here where our nail is going to go. Where our nail is going to go when we want to affix this to the roof. So now, can I get it off? Oh, much better. So, yeah, the amount of clay that you put down, actually, I'm going to transfer it back this way because I want it to slide off of and release off the can pretty easily too. So I'm going to continue to use that dry clay to my advantage. And again, it's cracking a little bit. I'm not going to worry about it too much because when they get leather hard, I'm going to take water and I'm going to rub that over the surface and we'll smooth out a lot of these minor cracks. But again, once again, let's see if she'll release from the can and I can get it to somewhat support itself. Like I said, the other one, it cracked pretty good, pretty significantly. Hold on a second. There we go. It cracked pretty significantly, so I might have a fun time with that one. And again, this is all you really want to do is just get it to lay down and kind of support itself. So laying down, there we go. And again, it's interesting, but this clay seems to crack quite a bit more than the tan clay. So that's interesting. I wouldn't have thought that would have been the case, being that it seems so much more plastic and pliable and a lot less imperfections or grit in the clay, but actually maybe that's what gives it its ability to do that. But again, I'll let these dry off. I'll take some kind of moist clay, go over the top. It probably won't not have a nice smooth texture. It'll probably be a little bit more rough like some of my other terracotta tiles, which again, it's just got to keep the water off the roof. So I don't think it's going to matter that much. But anyway, I've got kind of the barrel shape that I want. And like I said, we'll just let them dry a bit and then fire them and see what kind of color we get out of them too, because again, I'm wondering whether it will be a different color than the tan terracotta, the tan clay that I dug over at the side of the yard. So that's basically what we're doing here. I'll probably do another video because I'm getting close to the last, I'm getting pretty close to the last course or two or level or two of the cob on the cob kiln, and I'm sure somebody's going to want to know what it was like to do it, how to mix the cob, what to do with it. So actually earlier today I went out in the yard. They had recently cut the grass and there was quite a bit of dried grass around, so I had actually just run out of straw for my cob. And again, I was like, well, I've heard that you can use dried grass as well. So I'm actually thinking what I did is I went and I raked the yard up, and that bag right there is full of dried grass that once I wet the clay mixture in the tub over there, once I wet that down sufficiently, again, I get it really wet, almost like a concrete sloppiness to it, and then mix in the grass. When that dries, that grass will give it almost like a reinforced rebar type effect inside the clay, and it becomes very, very strong, where, I mean, this thing on the bottom where it's dry, it's not going anywhere. I mean, I can hit it as hard as I want, and it's only 3-4 inches thick. So it's quite strong. And again, that's what I wanted for the walls. So again, because, you know, with your kiln, your refractory brick is what's going to be on the inside, and that's where your heat needs to be. But again, how do you keep that protected is what I was thinking, if it's going to be outside. And how was I going to do it? Again, economically, I'm not going to go out and buy a ton of brick and mortar and roofing and this and that to make, you know, a protected kiln. So I'm planning on, I said, finishing this with cob, making a domed ceiling to the kiln, and then actually maybe bringing the top up to a peak, and then my tiles will line the sides of the roof. And then in between the two burner ports is where the chimney is going to extend up. Now this is going to be a downdraft kiln, so actually the inlet for the chimney, or the flue, is going to be down here at the bottom of the kiln. So the flame will come in, there will be baffles or something to keep the gases flowing this way and not directly out. Then we'll put some deflector bricks here at an angle to force the flame up to the top of the kiln. And then it will actually, if it for the draft, once the flue is drawing, will suck those flames back down, and that circular movement of the flame will give me hopefully a very even temperature inside the kiln. So it'll get sucked back down and then go up through the chimney. I would like to put some sort of a damper, build a damper into this. I've not really devised out how I might do that in the end, because the chimney won't be super tall. I may just get a piece of, I've been making some homemade refractory brick. I saw some guy on YouTube make refractory brick out of just clay and perlite. So I mixed some of my clay with perlite and made my own perlite bricks. I don't know how refractory they are, or how insulatory they are, or how well they'll work. If I have to go buy a few more high fire bricks, so be it. And I might just lay that across the top of the chimney in order to dampen it when I need to, in case it's drawing too fast. I am trying to build the area that the chimney can draw over. I'm trying to over-engineer it. I had heard a good rule of thumb was that you basically would want to have your outlet for your chimney flue be about the same size as your inlet for your flames. I actually went maybe another 50% above that when I designed this in my head, because I figure I can always dampen down, but I can't make my chimney any bigger without tearing things apart. So that is kind of what I figured I would do, is I will actually, if I have to, I can always make the holes smaller and fill them in if I need to. But so yeah, that's the project with the cob kiln, and hopefully I'm probably 1 or 2 more courses, because I usually get about, I don't know, a good between 4 and 6 inches of height each layer around that I do. So I think I'm already at like close to 24 inches, and I think I'll only go maybe one more course, or no more than 2 more courses up, because again, I want to efficiently be able to use both my burners. I don't want it to be, but I don't want it to be super big either and waste a lot of material, because again, I'm not a full-time potter. This is just a hobby, and so again, I don't want to have to wait 5 months in between firings because I can't fill my kiln. So, and again, burning up fuel is money. So talk to you later. Bye.